The cargo hold smelled like burnt circuits and broken dreams. Tom Riley crawled under the main power coupling with a flashlight clenched between his teeth and a prayer on his lips. His ship, the Wayward Star, had been making strange noises for weeks now, and with only 300 credits left in his account, professional repairs were out of the question. "Daddy, the scanner is beeping again," Emma called from the cockpit. His 8-year-old daughter had become an unofficial co-pilot over the past year since they'd started living on the ship full-time. She knew which buttons to push and which warning lights meant real trouble. "What kind of beeping?" Tom asked, his voice muffled by the access panel he was wedged under. "The slow one. Like when we found that broken satellite last month." Tom sighed and pulled himself out from under the machinery. The slow beeping meant a distress signal. According to the maritime code that governed space travel, all ships were required to investigate distress calls when safely possible. The problem was that Tom had learned the hard way that not every distress call came from someone who actually needed help. 3 months ago, he'd responded to a similar signal and nearly gotten himself and Emma killed by pirates using the beacon as bait. Only quick thinking and a desperate jump to hyperspace had saved them. Since then, Tom had been more careful about playing the hero. He made his way to the cockpit where Emma sat in the co-pilot's chair, her legs swinging freely since they were too short to reach the floor. She'd grown 3 inches since they'd started their nomadic life, but she still looked tiny in the adult-sized seat. "Show me the signal," Tom said, settling into the pilot's chair. Emma pointed to the scanner display. A weak signal pulsed from somewhere in the nearby asteroid field. According to the computer, it was coming from a small craft, probably a single-seat ship or escape pod. The signal had been broadcasting for less than an hour. "Could be someone who really needs help," Emma said, using the same argument she'd made the last time they'd encountered a distress beacon. "Could be pirates again," Tom countered, though he was already adjusting their course toward the signal. The truth was that Tom had never been good at ignoring people in trouble. It was why he'd left his comfortable job as a corporate pilot when he'd discovered his employer was secretly transporting weapons to fund a civil war. It was why he'd taken custody of Emma when his ex-wife had decided that being a mother was too much work. And it was why he was now guiding his aging cargo ship toward a potentially dangerous situation with only a few functioning weapons and a tank of fuel that wouldn't get them much farther. The asteroid field was a maze of floating rocks and debris from some long-ago mining operation. Tom navigated carefully between the larger asteroids, following the signal deeper into the field. The Wayward Star's sensors weren't military-grade, but they were good enough to detect the source of the distress call. "There," Emma said, pointing. Through the main viewport, a small ship drifted between 2 large asteroids, its hull scarred and blackened. It was unlike any design Tom had seen before. The curves were too smooth, too organic-looking for human engineering. The metal had a strange shimmer to it that seemed to shift colors in the light from their ship. "That's not one of ours," Tom muttered, referring to human ships in general. "Is it alien?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with excitement rather than fear. At 8 years old, she still believed that most of the universe was fundamentally good, and that aliens would be more likely to share cookies than start fights. "Looks like it," Tom said, running a scan of the vessel. The computer couldn't identify the design, but it detected a single life sign aboard. The ship appeared to be powered down, either by choice or by damage. Tom brought the Wayward Star alongside the alien craft and engaged the magnetic grappler. The 2 ships locked together with a soft thud that echoed through the hull. According to his instruments, the alien ship had breathable atmosphere, though the air mixture was slightly different from what humans were used to. "Stay here," Tom told Emma, reaching for the sidearm he kept locked in a compartment beside his seat. "But Daddy, what if they're hurt?" Tom paused, looking at his daughter's concerned face. Emma had a gift for caring about others, even strangers, even potential threats. It was a quality Tom both admired and worried about in a universe that wasn't always kind to people who trusted too easily. "I'll check on them," he promised. "But you stay here and monitor the comm system. If anything goes wrong, you hit the emergency release and get us out of here, understand?" Emma nodded solemnly. She'd been through enough dangerous situations to know when her father was being serious. Tom made his way to the airlock that connected their ships. The alien vessel's airlock was larger than human standard, but the basic design was similar enough that the systems were compatible. He cycled through the airlocks and stepped into the alien ship. The interior was as unusual as the exterior. The walls curved in ways that seemed to follow no human logic, and the lighting came from panels that glowed with a soft, warm radiance. Everything was slightly too large, as if built for people taller than humans. Tom followed the corridor toward what he assumed was the cockpit, guided by the layout that seemed universal among spacefaring species. The distress signal was coming from somewhere ahead. He found her in the pilot's seat. The alien was small, probably no taller than Emma would be in a few years. Her skin had a silvery sheen that reminded Tom of polished metal, and her hair was white as starlight. She was unconscious, her head resting against the side of her seat. Her clothes looked expensive, but were torn and stained. Tom approached carefully, his weapon ready but not aimed at her. As he got closer, he could see that she was breathing, though it seemed shallow and labored. She appeared to be young, maybe. A teenager by human standards, though it was hard to be sure with an alien species. The ship's computer console was displaying what looked like warning messages in an alien language. Tom couldn't read the text, but the red coloring and flashing lights suggested serious problems. Power levels appeared to be critical, and several systems showed damage indicators. The girl stirred as Tom moved closer. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing irises of bright gold that seemed to glow in the soft light. When she saw Tom, she tried to sit up quickly and immediately winced in pain. "Easy," Tom said, holding up his free hand to show he meant no harm. "I'm here to help." The girl stared at him for a moment, then said something in a musical language he didn't recognize. When Tom shook his head to indicate he didn't understand, she tried again in broken but recognizable standard, the common language used for trade and communication between species. "Please." "Not hurt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I won't hurt you," Tom assured her, slowly holstering his weapon. "My name is Tom. What's yours?" "Kira," the girl said after a moment's hesitation. "Kira, your ship is in bad shape. You need medical attention. Will you let me help you?" Kira looked around the cockpit as if seeing the damage for the first time. Her golden eyes filled with what Tom recognized as fear, but not fear of him. Fear of something else. "Cannot go back," she said firmly. "Please, cannot go back." Tom studied her face, seeing something he recognized in her expression. The desperate look of someone running from something bigger and more dangerous than themselves. He'd worn that same expression when he'd left his old life behind, taking Emma and striking out on their own. "Okay," he said gently. "We'll figure something out. But first, let's get you checked by a medical scanner. Can you walk?" Kira nodded and tried to stand. Her legs were shaky, but she managed to stay upright with Tom's help. Together, they made their way back to the wayward star, where Emma was waiting anxiously in the cockpit. "Is she okay?" Emma asked, immediately moving to help support Kira on the other side. "I think so," Tom said. "Let's get her to the medical bay." As they helped Kira through the ship, Tom found himself wondering what kind of trouble a young alien girl could be running from, and whether helping her would bring that trouble down on his own small family. But looking at Emma's concerned face and Kira's grateful eyes, Tom knew he'd already made his choice. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The medical scanner's soft blue light played across Kira's silvery skin as she lay still on the examination table. Tom studied the readout, grateful that the medical bay's computer could adapt to different species. The diagnosis was better than he'd feared, but worse than he'd hoped. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, and what appeared to be stress-induced illness, but nothing that proper rest and nutrition couldn't fix. Emma had fallen asleep in the chair beside the medical bay, her head resting on her arms on the small table. She'd insisted on staying while Tom ran the scans, worried that Kira might wake up scared and alone. Now both girls slept peacefully while Tom tried to make sense of what they'd gotten themselves into. Kira's ship was a mystery. The computer systems were completely alien, using languages and symbols that the Wayward Star's translation software couldn't even begin to interpret. But Tom had managed to access some basic navigation data, and what he'd found made his stomach twist with worry. The ship's journey had originated from somewhere deep in the core systems, the heavily defended heart of the hegemony empire. That was Imperial space, where humans were barely tolerated and certainly not welcomed. Whatever had brought Kira from there to the Outer Rim, it wasn't likely to be good news for anyone involved. Tom had hidden both ships in the shadow of a large asteroid, but he knew it was only a temporary solution. If someone was looking for Kira, they'd eventually find her. The question was whether that someone was trying to help her or hurt her. Dawn came early in space when you set your own schedule. Tom woke Emma gently, and together they prepared a simple breakfast from their limited supplies. Nutri-bars, reconstituted fruit juice, and protein paste that tasted better than it looked. It wasn't much, but it was what they had. Kira woke to the smell of food cooking, sitting up quickly and looking around in confusion before remembering where she was. Her golden eyes found Tom and Emma in the small galley area, and she relaxed slightly. "Good morning," Emma said cheerfully, offering Kira a plate with a Nutri-bar and a cup of juice. "Dad says you're feeling better." "Thank you," Kira said, accepting the food gratefully. She took a small bite of the Nutri-bar and made a face. "This is interesting," Tom laughed. "Yeah, ship food isn't exactly gourmet cooking. Sorry about that." "No, it is good," Kira said quickly, as if afraid of offending them. "I am grateful for anything." As they ate, Tom studied their guest more carefully. In better light and after rest, Kira looked healthier but also more obviously young. Her clothes, despite being torn and stained, were made from materials Tom didn't recognize. Fabric that seemed to shimmer and shift like liquid metal. Whatever Kira was running from, she'd been living well before she'd fled. "Kira," Tom said gently, "can you tell us what happened? How did you end up alone in that ship?" Kira's hand tightened on her cup of juice. For a moment, Tom thought she might not answer. Then she began to speak, her words careful and measured. "There was attack," she said. "Bad people came to our convoy. My guardian put me in the small ship and told me to run. I was supposed to go to safe place, but the storm..." She gestured helplessly. "I got lost." "What kind of convoy?" Tom asked. "Diplomatic mission," Kira said after a pause. "My guardian was ambassador. We were traveling to meeting with frontier colonies." Tom nodded, though something about her story didn't quite fit. Diplomatic convoys usually traveled with heavy escorts, and they rarely brought children along on dangerous missions to the Outer Rim. But then again, he didn't know much about how alien governments operated. "Do you have family we can contact?" Emma asked. "They must be worried about you." Kira's expression darkened. "Family is complicated. She struggled for words. "They have expectations. I was supposed to do something I did not want to do. That is why I was with Ambassador. To learn about other options." Tom felt a chill of recognition. He remembered his own father's expectations, the careful plans laid out for his life that had felt like a prison. The day he'd finally said no and walked away had been both the hardest and the best decision he'd ever made. "What kind of expectations?" he asked gently. "Marriage," Kira said, the word coming out like a curse. To someone I have never met. Someone old and cruel. My family says it will help our people, but She looked down at her hands. I wanted to see what else was possible first. Emma reached over and patted Kira's arm. That's awful. You shouldn't have to marry someone you don't like. In my culture, children do not always get to choose, Kira said sadly, especially daughters of important families. Tom was beginning to get a clearer picture of what they were dealing with. A young alien girl from a wealthy and politically connected family running from an arranged marriage. It was a story as old as civilization itself, but it took on new complications when it involved interstellar politics. How important is your family? He asked. Kira hesitated for a long moment. Very important, she said finally. My father has much influence in the Empire. The way she said empire made Tom's blood run cold. There was only one empire that humans had regular contact with, and it was the last organization he wanted to anger. The Hegemony Empire controlled dozens of star systems and had the military might to back up their authority. They tolerated independent traders like Tom, but only barely. Kira, Tom said carefully, when you say empire, do you mean the hegemony? Kira nodded reluctantly. My father he has high position in the government. Tom felt the walls of his comfortable life beginning to crumble. He'd picked up the runaway daughter of an imperial official. If her family was looking for her, they wouldn't be sending polite requests through diplomatic channels. They'd be sending warships. We need to get you home, he said, trying to keep his voice calm for Emma's sake. No! Kira's reaction was immediate and desperate. Please, I cannot go back, not yet. If they find me now, I will be forced to marry Prince Vanol immediately. My father will not give me another chance to choose. Prince? Emma repeated, her eyes going wide. You're a princess? Tom felt the last of his hope draining away. Not just an imperial official's daughter. Royalty. He'd managed to rescue imperial royalty, and now he was caught between a scared child who needed help and the most powerful government in known space. I am sorry, Kira said, seeing Tom's expression. I should have told you before, but I was afraid you would not help me if you knew. Tom looked at his daughter, who was staring at Kira with fascination rather than fear. Emma had always been impressed by stories of princesses and adventures. To her, this was probably the most exciting thing that had ever happened. You're really a princess? Emma asked again. Third daughter of Emperor Nex, Kira confirmed. But I never wanted to be princess. I wanted to be diplomat, or scientist, or explorer, anything but marriage prize. Tom's mind was racing through the implications. Every minute Kira stayed on his ship was another step toward what would probably be a very unpleasant encounter with Imperial forces. But looking at the desperate hope in her golden eyes, he found himself remembering his own escape from a life he hadn't chosen. How long before they find you? He asked. I do not know, Kira admitted. My ship has tracker, but it was damaged in the storm. Maybe they cannot follow signal anymore. Tom's scanner chose that moment to pick up new contacts at the edge of the system. Large ships, moving in formation. Military configuration. His heart sank as he counted 12 vessels, including what looked like 2 massive dreadnoughts. I think they found the signal, he said grimly, showing Kira the scanner display. Kira stared at the approaching fleet with a mixture of fear and resignation. That is Imperial Third Fleet, she said quietly. My father's personal command. Emma looked between them, finally beginning to understand the seriousness of their situation. What do we do now? Tom looked at the scanner again. The Imperial fleet was still several hours away, but the wayward star couldn't outrun military vessels. He could try to hide among the asteroids, but eventually they'd find him. He could surrender Kira and hope for mercy, but that would mean sending a frightened child back to a life she didn't want. Or he could try to find a third option. First, he said, we find a better place to hide while we figure this out. Emma, start plotting a course toward the outer asteroid belt. Kira, I need you to tell me everything you can about that fleet's capabilities. You will help me? Kira asked, her voice full of desperate hope. Tom looked at his daughter's determined face and made a decision that would change all their lives. Yeah, he said. We'll figure something out. The ancient mining station hung in space like a metal spider, its long arms reaching out into the asteroid field that had once been its source of income. Tom guided the wayward star carefully through the debris field that surrounded the abandoned facility, using the larger chunks of rock and metal to mask their heat signature from any pursuing sensors. Emma pressed her face against the cockpit window, watching the dark station grow larger as they approached. It looks spooky, she said. Do you think anyone still lives there? According to the navigation computer, Hadley Station was abandoned 15 years ago when the mining company went bankrupt, Tom replied, checking their approach vector. Should be empty, which is exactly what we need right now. In the seat behind them, Kira watched the Imperial fleet's progress on the scanner display. The 12 warships had spread out in a search pattern, methodically checking every hiding place in the system. They were being thorough, professional, and completely ruthless in their hunt. They will not give up, Kira said quietly. My father is very stubborn when he wants something. All fathers are stubborn about protecting their children, Tom said. Though he kept his tone neutral, he was trying very hard not to think about what Emperor Nex might do to the people who had taken his daughter. Tom brought the wayward star into the shadow of the station's largest docking arm and engaged the magnetic clamps. The old automated system still worked well enough to provide a basic connection, though the power levels were minimal. It would have to do. How long can we hide here? Emma asked. Not long enough, Tom admitted. They'll check every station, in the system eventually. We need a plan. Over the next few hours, they worked together to understand their situation. Kira explained the capabilities of the Imperial fleet while Tom studied star charts and Emma helped monitor communications. The picture that emerged was not encouraging. The Third Fleet was one of the Empire's most advanced battle groups. Fast, well-armed and equipped with sensors that could detect a ship's engine signature from several star systems away. The fleet commander was Admiral Nash, who had served the Imperial family for decades and was known for his absolute loyalty and tactical brilliance. Admiral Nash taught me strategy games when I was little, Kira said sadly. He is like uncle to me. He will not stop looking until he finds me, and he will not believe I left willingly. What about your father? Tom asked. What's he like? Kira's expression was complicated. He loves me, I think. But he loves the Empire more. He believes that duty comes before personal desires, always. He arranged my marriage because he thinks it will prevent war between our territory and the outer dominions. Emma looked up from the communication console where she'd been monitoring Imperial transmissions. They're offering a reward, she announced. A really big one, for information about a missing person of great importance. Tom felt his stomach sink. A large reward meant that every bounty hunter, smuggler, and desperate trader in the sector would be looking for them. Their safe hiding places would become traps as people tried to claim the bounty. How big is really big? He asked. Emma showed him the transmission. Tom whistled low when he saw the amount. It was enough money to buy a new ship, or retire to a comfortable planet, or fund a small colony. It was also enough money to make people do very dangerous and stupid things. We can't stay here, Tom said. Too many people will be tempted by that kind of reward. Where can we go? Kira asked. Tom was studying the star charts when Emma made an observation that changed everything. Dad, look at this. She pointed to a section of the Imperial communications. They'd been monitoring. They keep talking about diplomatic consequences and political stability. They're not just looking for Kira. They're worried about what her disappearance means. Tom read through the transmissions more carefully. Emma was right. The Imperial commanders weren't just conducting a search and rescue operation. They were preparing for the possibility of interstellar conflict. Prince Vanol's government had apparently taken Kira's disappearance as a sign that the Empire was backing out of the marriage agreement, and they were mobilizing their own forces in response. "They think someone kidnapped you to stop the wedding," Tom said to Kira. "Which means they think this is an act of war," Kira replied, her face pale. "Oh no, Father will not negotiate if he believes the Empire is under attack. He will respond with force." Emma looked between them. "What does that mean?" "It means that people are going to get hurt because of me," Kira said miserably. "Innocent people who have nothing to do with any of this." Tom watched the scanner as Imperial patrol ships spread out across the system, checking every station and asteroid that could hide a small vessel. Behind them, larger battle cruisers maintained position near the jump points, ready to intercept anyone trying to flee the wall system. "There has to be another way," Tom said. "What if we could prove that you left willingly, that no one kidnapped you?" "How?" Kira asked. "My father will not believe I chose to run away. He thinks I am too young and too sheltered to make such decisions." "Then, we convince him otherwise," Tom said, an idea beginning to form. "What if we could show him that you're capable of making your own choices, that you're not the helpless child he thinks you are?" Emma's eyes lit up. "Like when you let me help fix the engines even though I'm just a kid, because I proved I could handle the responsibility?" "Exactly like that," Tom said, smiling at his daughter's quick understanding. "Kira, what would it take to prove to your father that you're ready to make your own decisions about your life?" Kira thought about it for a long moment. "I would need to show him that I understand the consequences of my choices. That I am not just running away from responsibility, but running towards something better. And what would be better than an arranged marriage? Serving the Empire in my own way," Kira said slowly. "Father always says that our family's duty is to strengthen the Empire and protect our people. What if I could do that without getting married?" Tom felt a spark of hope. "What kind of service were you thinking about?" "Diplomacy," Kira said, her voice growing stronger. "The Empire needs better relations with the independent colonies and the frontier worlds. Someone who understands both imperial politics and what life is like outside the core systems." Emma bounced in her seat. "That's perfect. You could be like an ambassador, but one who really understands what regular people need. The problem is getting close enough to your father to make that argument," Tom pointed out. "Right now, his fleet is shooting first and asking questions later." As if summoned by his words, the communication console began broadcasting an Imperial transmission on all frequencies. Admiral Nash's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim and determined. "This is Admiral Nash of the Imperial Third Fleet," the Admiral announced. "We are conducting a search for a missing person of critical importance to Imperial security. Any vessel found harboring this individual will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Any information leading to recovery will be rewarded. This system is now under Imperial authority until further notice." Tom felt the walls closing in around them. They were trapped in a system controlled by Imperial forces, with no way to escape and no way to prove their innocence without revealing Kira's location. "There is one option," Kira said quietly, "but it would be very dangerous." "More dangerous than what we're already doing?" Tom asked. "I could contact Admiral Nash directly, tell him I am safe, and ask to speak with my father. They'll demand your location immediately," Tom pointed out. "Yes," Kira agreed. "But if I refuse to tell them where I am until I speak with father, they might listen. Admiral Nash cares about me. He would not want to force me to do something against my will if he believed I had good reasons." Emma looked worried. "What if they just trace the signal and find us anyway?" "Then we'd better have a very good argument ready," Tom said. "And a backup plan in case talking doesn't work." Over the next hour, they prepared for what might be the most important conversation of their lives. Tom programmed an escape route that would take them deeper into the asteroid field if things went wrong. Emma helped Kira practice what she wanted to say to her father, and all three of them tried not to think about what would happen if the Emperor decided that his daughter's wishes were less important than imperial politics. "Are you ready?" Tom asked as they prepared to open a channel to the Imperial fleet. Kira straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin with a dignity that reminded Tom that she really was royal blood. "I am ready." "Remember," Emma said, taking Kira's hand, "you're not just a princess. You're our friend, and friends stick together no matter what." Tom activated the communication system and sent a narrow beam transmission toward the Imperial flagship. Within minutes, they had a response. It was time to find out if an emperor would listen to his daughter's dreams, or if they were all about to become fugitives from the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The response from the Imperial flagship came faster than expected. Tom's hands were steady on the communication controls, but his heart was racing as the main screen flickered to life. Admiral Nash appeared first, his weathered face showing a mixture of relief and stern disapproval. "Princess Kira Leth," the Admiral said formally, though Tom could hear the underlying concern in his voice. "We have been searching for you. Are you injured? Have you been harmed in any way?" "I am well, Uncle Nash," Kira replied, using what was apparently a childhood nickname. "The people who found me have treated me with great kindness." Admiral Nash's eyes shifted to Tom, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Captain Riley, I assume, you will release the princess immediately and surrender yourself for questioning." "With respect, Admiral," Tom said carefully. "I think the princess has something she wants to say first." "I wish to speak with my father," Kira said firmly. "Before I return home, I need him to understand why I left." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. "Kirillith, child, you have caused a great deal of trouble. Prince Vanol's government believes you were kidnapped to sabotage the marriage agreement. They have mobilized their fleet and are demanding explanations we cannot provide." "Then let me provide them," Kira said. "Let me speak to Father and explain my actions." Admiral Nash was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "I will contact the Emperor, but Captain Riley, understand that any attempt to flee or harm the princess will result in your immediate destruction." The transmission cut off, leaving them alone with the weight of what was coming. Emma had moved closer to Kira during the conversation, and now both girls sat together on the small bench near the communication console. "Are you scared?" Emma asked quietly. "Terrified," Kira admitted, "but also hopeful. For the first time in my life, I get to choose what I say to my father instead of just listening to what he expects of me." Tom was monitoring the Imperial fleet's movements while they waited. The ships had stopped their search pattern and were now maintaining position around the system's jump points. Whatever happened next, they were making sure no one left until the situation was resolved. 20 minutes later, the communication system activated again. This time, the screen showed a room Tom had only seen in news broadcasts. The Imperial throne room aboard the flagship was a study in power and authority, all gleaming metal and flowing banners. And seated on the command throne was Emperor Nex himself. Tom had seen pictures of the Emperor before, but meeting him face to face, even through a video link, was an entirely different experience. The man radiated authority in a way that made Tom want to stand at attention. His silvery skin and golden eyes were like Kira's. But where she had warmth and curiosity, the Emperor had the weight of absolute power. "Daughter," the Emperor said, and his voice carried across space like a command that could not be disobeyed. "Father," Kira replied, and Tom was impressed by how steady her voice remained. "You will explain yourself," the Emperor continued. "Your disappearance has threatened the stability of our alliance with the Outer Dominions. Prince Vanol believes you were taken against your will to prevent the marriage. Wars have started over smaller insults. I was not taken, father. I left. The Emperor's golden eyes flashed dangerously. You are a child. You do not understand the consequences of your actions. I understand that you want to trade me like cargo to prevent a war, Kira said, her voice growing stronger. I understand that my wishes mean nothing compared to imperial politics. But I also understand that there might be better ways to serve our people. Tom watched the exchange with fascination and growing respect for Kira. She was standing up to the most powerful person in the galaxy, and she was doing it with intelligence and courage that would have been impressive in someone twice her age. Oh, will do your duty, the Emperor said coldly. You will return immediately and marry Prince Vanol as arranged. What if my duty could be better served in other ways? Kira asked. What if I could strengthen the Empire without sacrificing my freedom? Speak plainly, child. Kira took a deep breath and launched into the argument they had prepared together. She spoke about the independent colonies and frontier worlds that viewed the Empire with suspicion and fear. She talked about the need for diplomacy that came from understanding rather than just authority. She described her vision of serving as a bridge between the imperial core and the outer territories. I want to serve our people, Father. But I want to serve them with my mind and my skills, not just my bloodline. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment, studying his daughter's face through the screen. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its cold authority. And you believe this service would be more valuable than the alliance your marriage would secure? I believe it could be, Kira said. Prince Vanol wants to marry me because I am your daughter, not because he cares about me as a person. That kind of alliance is built on fear, not respect. It will not last. Emma had been silent throughout the conversation, but now she spoke up. Your Majesty, can I say something? The Emperor's attention shifted to Tom's daughter, and Tom felt his protective instincts kick into high alert. But Emma met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. I think Kira is really smart and brave, Emma said simply. She saved herself when her ship was damaged, and she's been thinking about how to help people she's never even met. That sounds like good princess behavior to me. Something that might have been a smile crossed the Emperor's face. And what would you know about princess behavior, young human? Not much, Emma admitted. But I know about making choices. My dad lets me help fly the ship even though I'm just a kid, because he says being young doesn't mean you can't be responsible. Maybe being a princess is the same way? Tom felt a surge of pride at his daughter's words. She had managed to say, in a few simple sentences, what he and Kira had been struggling to communicate. The Emperor's attention returned to Kira. You would give up your claim to the throne for this diplomatic service? I would trade my right to rule for the right to choose how I serve, Kira said firmly. Another long silence. Then the Emperor's gaze shifted to Tom, and Tom felt the full weight of imperial attention focused on him. Captain Riley, the Emperor said, you have shown remarkable courage in protecting my daughter and allowing her to speak freely. What would you ask as a reward for your service? Tom had expected threats, demands, or accusations. He had not expected to be offered a reward by the most powerful person in the galaxy. He glanced at Emma, then at Kira, then back at the Emperor. I don't want anything, Your Majesty, Tom said honestly. I just want to keep making an honest living out here in the frontier. Maybe help people when they need it. You would ask for nothing. No wealth, no position, no favors. Just the chance to raise my daughter in freedom, sir. Same thing you want for yours, I think. The Emperor studied Tom for a moment, and something in his expression shifted. The absolute authority was still there, but it was tempered by what might have been understanding. Admiral Nash, the Emperor said, though his eyes remained on the screen. What is the current status of Prince Vanol's fleet? Admiral Nash's voice came from off-screen. They have moved to the border of our territory, Your Majesty. Prince Vanol is demanding an explanation for the princess's disappearance and threatening consequences if she does not arrive for the wedding ceremony as planned. Send a message to Prince Vanol, the Emperor commanded. Tell him that Princess Kirilleth has chosen to serve the Empire in a different capacity. The marriage agreement is dissolved by mutual consent. Kira's eyes went wide with hope and disbelief. Father? You wish to be a diplomat, daughter? Then your first assignment is to negotiate with Prince Vanol's government. Convince them that a trade alliance will serve both our peoples better than a political marriage. If you succeed, you will have proven your point. If you fail, the Emperor left the threat unspoken. I understand, Kira said, though Tom could see her hands trembling with excitement and fear. You will not be alone in this task, the Emperor continued. Admiral Nash will provide you with a diplomatic ship and a small escort. You will also have advisors who understand both imperial politics and frontier relations. The Emperor's gaze returned to Tom. Captain Riley, your knowledge of the independent colonies and frontier worlds would be valuable to this mission. Would you be willing to serve as an advisor to my daughter? Tom blinked in surprise. You want me to work for the Empire? I want you to work with my daughter, the Emperor corrected. Help her understand the perspective of people like yourself, people who value freedom and independence above security and order. Emma tugged on Tom's sleeve. Dad, this sounds like an adventure. Tom looked at his daughter's excited face, then at Kira's hopeful expression. The safe thing would be to politely decline and return to their quiet life as independent traders. But safety had never been Tom's strong suit, and Emma was right. This did sound like an adventure. I'll help, Tom said, but I have conditions. The Emperor raised an eyebrow. You would negotiate with me? Just asking for fairness, Your Majesty. I keep my ship and my independence. Emma comes with me and she gets a proper education while we're traveling. And if this diplomatic thing doesn't work out, we're free to leave without any hard feelings. Done, the Emperor said without hesitation. Admiral Nash will provide you with the details of your assignment. And Captain Riley, thank you for protecting my daughter when she needed protection. That debt will not be forgotten. The transmission ended, leaving them alone in the quiet of the abandoned station. For a moment, nobody spoke, as if afraid that talking might make the whole incredible conversation disappear like a dream. Did that really just happen? Emma asked finally. I think so, Tom said, still trying to process what they'd agreed to. Kira was staring at the blank screen with tears streaming down her silvery cheeks. But she was smiling, and when she turned to look at Tom and Emma, her golden eyes were bright with joy. I get to choose, she whispered. For the first time in my life, I get to choose my own path. Emma hugged her new friend tightly. And we get to help you do it. Tom activated the ship's communication system and sent a signal to Admiral Nash, officially accepting their new assignment. Whatever came next, it would certainly be more interesting than hauling cargo between frontier stations. As the Imperial fleet began moving toward the jump point, Tom realized that their quiet life as independent traders was over. But maybe, just maybe, they were about to start something even better. 6 months later, the diplomatic vessel Silver Dawn dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri commercial zone. Tom stood on the bridge watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen, its rotating sections glittering with the lights of 1,000 different ships and cultures. Beside him, Emma pressed her face against the observation window, counting the various vessel types she could identify. Look, Dad, there's a Andromedan heavy cruiser and 3 Terran cargo haulers. And is that a Scythian pleasure yacht? Good eye, Tom said, ruffling his daughter's hair. What else do you see? Emma studied the scanner displays that had become as familiar to her as picture books. Lots of independent traders, some mining ships, and... She paused, her brow furrowing, in concentration. Those look like military escorts, but they're not flying Imperial colors. Very good, said a voice behind them. Ambassador Kirilleth approached the observation area, her diplomatic robes flowing around her like liquid starlight. The scared girl they'd rescued from the asteroid field had grown into a confident young woman over the past months, though she still insisted that Tom and Emma call her Kira when they were in private. Prince Vanol's ships? Tom asked, nodding toward the military vessels Emma had spotted. 3 of them, Kira confirmed. Exactly what we expected. He's here for the trade summit just as we hoped. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of diplomatic missions, cultural exchanges, and careful relationship building. Kira had thrown herself into her new role with enthusiasm that surprised even Tom. She'd studied the histories and cultures of dozens of frontier worlds, learned to speak 4 new languages, and developed a reputation as the imperial diplomat who actually listened to what people had to say. More importantly, she'd proven that her father had been right to trust her judgment. Her first major success had been negotiating a mining rights agreement between the Empire and the Kepler colony that had prevented what could have been a nasty territorial dispute. Her second had been establishing a cultural exchange program that was already improving relations between imperial worlds and their independent neighbors. But Prince Vanol remained the biggest challenge. The ruler of the Outer Dominions had not taken kindly to the dissolution of his marriage agreement with Kira. He'd spent months making subtle threats and testing imperial resolve, never quite crossing the line into open hostility but making it clear that he felt insulted and betrayed. "How are you feeling about this?" Tom asked Kira as they prepared to dock with the station. "Nervous," she admitted, "but also excited. This is our chance to prove that diplomacy really can work better than political marriages." Emma looked up from the scanner display she'd been studying. "Kira, why did Prince Vanol want to marry you? Anyway, was it just because your dad is the emperor?" Kira nodded. "Exactly. Marriage to me would have given his government a direct connection to imperial power, a way to influence our policies and gain access to our trade networks. But now he has to earn those things instead of just getting them by marrying you," Emma said, understanding the situation with the clarity that often came from young minds. "Right, which means he has to offer us something valuable in return." Tom smiled at the exchange. Emma had become an unofficial part of their diplomatic team, and her questions often helped Kira think through complex political problems. The Imperial. Education tutors who traveled with them had been amazed by Emma's quick grasp of interstellar politics, though Tom suspected it had more to do with her natural curiosity than any special talent. The docking process at Centauri Station was smooth and professional. The station's administrators had gone out of their way to accommodate the diplomatic mission, providing private meeting rooms and enhanced security for the sensitive negotiations ahead. As they made their way through the station's corridors, Tom noticed the careful attention their small group received. Kira's imperial diplomatic credentials opened doors and earned respectful bows from station personnel, but Tom could also see the curious looks directed at him and Emma, the human trader and his daughter, who somehow rated inclusion in an imperial diplomatic mission were apparently the subject of considerable speculation. "Ambassador Kirilleth," said a tall, blue-skinned alien who approached them near the diplomatic quarter. "I am Administrator Vex of Prince Vanol's delegation. His Highness is prepared to receive you at your convenience." "Thank you, Administrator," Kira replied formally. "We are ready to begin discussions immediately." The meeting room was carefully neutral, decorated with artwork from a dozen different cultures, and furnished with seating that could accommodate various alien physiologies. Prince Vanol was already waiting when they arrived, an imposing figure, in elaborate robes that seemed designed to emphasize his authority and wealth. Tom had seen pictures of the prince, but meeting him in person was a different experience. Vanol was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that commanded attention in any room. His skin had a golden hue that shifted in the light, and his eyes were a deep purple that seemed to see everything. He was also older than Tom had expected, probably in his 50s by human standards. "Princess Kirilleth," the prince said, rising from his seat. His voice was deep and resonant, carrying just a hint of the anger he was obviously working to control. "Or should I say ambassador? I confess myself confused by your new status." "Ambassador will suffice, Your Highness," Kira replied calmly. "I hope we can discuss new opportunities for cooperation between our peoples." "Cooperation," the prince repeated, his purple eyes studying Tom and Emma with obvious disapproval. "Yes, I have heard about your new approach to diplomacy. Very innovative." Tom felt the subtle insult but kept his expression neutral. He'd learned over the past months that diplomatic meetings often involved a lot of careful verbal sparring before anyone got to the actual business. "Your Highness," Kira said, "I believe our peoples have more to gain from a trade alliance than from a political marriage. The Outer Dominions have resources and expertise that the Empire values, and we have technology and market access that could benefit your worlds. And what guarantee do I have that the Empire will honor such agreements?" the prince asked. "Political marriages create bonds that last generations. Trade agreements can be canceled when they become inconvenient." Emma, who had been sitting quietly beside Tom, suddenly spoke up. "Why not both?" Everyone turned to look at her, and Tom felt a moment of parental panic. But Emma continued with the confidence of someone who'd been part of diplomatic discussions for months. "I mean, why not have a trade agreement and a marriage? Just not between you and Kira. Don't you have other kids who might want to marry someone from the Empire?" The prince stared at Emma for a moment, then began to laugh. It was a rich, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "Out of the mouths of children," he said, still chuckling. "Yes, young human, I do have other children, including a daughter who has expressed considerable interest in Imperial culture." Kira's eyes lit up with possibility. "A cultural exchange marriage? Someone who chose the alliance rather than being forced into it?" "Precisely," the prince said, his earlier hostility evaporating. "My daughter Lisa has been studying Imperial history and philosophy for years. She would consider marriage to an appropriate Imperial partner to be an honor rather than a burden." Tom watched in amazement as Emma's simple question opened up possibilities that none of the adults had considered. Sometimes the best diplomatic solutions came from thinking outside the established patterns. The negotiations that followed were complex and detailed, but the foundation had been established. A comprehensive trade agreement between the Empire and the Outer Dominions, sealed by a voluntary marriage between Prince Vanol's daughter and a younger son of Emperor Nex. Both sides would get what they wanted, and no one would be forced into a life they didn't choose. As they finalized the preliminary agreements, Prince Vanol turned to Kira with something that looked like respect. "You were right to refuse my proposal, Ambassador," he said seriously. "I wanted to marry the Emperor's daughter for political advantage. You have given me something better, a true alliance between equals." That evening, as they celebrated the successful negotiations in their private quarters aboard the Silver Dawn, Kira sat with Tom and Emma looking out at the stars beyond the station. "I never imagined my life could be like this," she said quietly. 6 months ago, I was running away from everything. Now I'm running toward things I never knew I wanted." "Like what?" Emma asked. "Like having friends who see me as more than just a princess. Like work that matters to real people. Like the chance to explore the galaxy and meet new cultures." Kira smiled at them both. "Like having a family that chose to include me instead of being stuck with me." Tom felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. They'd started this adventure trying to help a scared child, and somehow they'd all found something they hadn't known they were looking for. "So, what's next?" he asked. Kira pulled up a star chart on her personal tablet, showing their planned route for the coming months. The Andromedan Commonwealth has requested diplomatic talks about opening new trade routes. The Kepler Alliance wants to discuss mutual defense agreements. And there are at least a dozen frontier colonies that have never had formal contact with the Empire. Sounds busy, Emma said cheerfully. Sounds perfect, Tom agreed. As the Silver Dawn prepared to depart Centauri Station, Tom reflected on how much their lives had changed since that day in the asteroid field. They were no longer just independent traders scraping by on the frontier. They'd become part of something bigger, something that was slowly changing the shape of interstellar politics. Emma had gained an education that would prepare her for any future she chose, whether that was following in her father's footsteps as a trader or pursuing her own diplomatic career. Kira had found a way to serve her people while still being true to herself. And Tom had discovered that sometimes the best adventures came from saying yes when someone needed help. The stars ahead held infinite possibilities, and for the first time in his life, Tom Riley felt like they had all the time in the universe to explore them together.